Hello, and welcome to a wee presentation with the Living Memory Association. Today, through photographs and memories, we take a trip back to some beautiful and well-loved shop fronts in Edinburgh. This beautiful photo shows three young women in an Edwardian baker shop wearing work aprons over their day dresses and posing formally in front of the fresh loaves from the early morning baking. As was the case with all shops, the produce, here the bread, is neatly stacked in shelves behind a counter. This is, of course, because no customers chose bread for themselves. Rather, it was handed to them from behind the shop counter by the shopkeeper or their assistant. Unfortunately, we do not know the names of these women, as this photograph was donated to us anonymously. This photo of Agnes Harris holding her son Theo's hand was taken on Gorgey Road in 1932. While it doesn't show the shop front or the shopkeeper, we can see the details of Agnes and another shopper just on the edge of the image, out doing the rounds of shops to collect their messages. If you look closely, you can also see the butcher's delivery bike leaning against the rails just behind and between Theo and his mother. Amazingly, we have another photo taken on the very same spot just a few years later, in 1935. This photograph was donated by Ruby Wilkie, and the photograph shows her mother, Mrs. Darling, who, like the mother and son in the photo we saw before, is carrying the messages home along Gorgey Road. Once again, the butcher's is in the background and his faithful delivery bike is still leaning against the rails outside the shop. Some of you may recognize the church on the right as Gorgey Parish Church, though at the time when the photograph was taken, it was then called Cairns Memorial Church. We leave the 1930s Gorgey for another butcher's. This time we see the butcher brothers Bill and Arnold Bannerman, smiling and proudly posing in front of their butcher's shop at 96 Northfield Broadway. These photographs, taken in the early 1960s by Ronnie Dunbar, show an updated delivery service as Arnold poses in front of his car in the second photograph. We can't say for certain that it was used for delivery, as the bike was for the Gorgey butchers in the earlier photo, but Arnold certainly seems pleased and proud of both his butcher shop and his fine automobile. On the spot where Bannerman's butcher once stood is now Broadfield's bar. The photographs on the next two slides were donated by Alma Lang and show members of her family who worked in the Young Brothers Oakfield Bakery, in a building which now forms part of the Pleasance and leads down to the Grassmarket area. Alma's Uncle Charlie is the baker sitting in the front row on the right. Alma remembers how lucky she was to have a baker for an uncle. She said, "Uncle Charlie was a bachelor and stayed with his mother, my gran. He made super currant loaves and shortbread and all our birthday cakes." Another visitor remembers the beautiful smell of bread as it was baked in the Young Brothers Bakery, and how it mixed with the smells from Stewart's Whiskey Bond not far away. Here is another fabulous photograph from Alma Lang. In this one, we see her gran in the front right. Alma's gran worked in the confectionery department, and this image was taken in 1933. The large area outside the bakery where the Young Brothers vans were loaded for delivery was very popular with the children in the area. They would wait for the vans to leave and scour the area looking for any old cakes or biscuits that had fallen from the loading. But as some of our visitors remember, you had to be quick, otherwise the rats got to the treasures before you did. From butchers to bakers, but no photos of candlestick makers, I'm afraid. Though if you needed one in 1927, your best bet might have been to stop by the co-op. Here we have a photo of the branch on Bangor Road, and again we see the proud staff standing in front of the shop. It's a little hard to make out all the details, but it's still wonderful to see all of the wares neatly stacked and economically spaced in the two large front windows. Each assistant's apron is slightly different and might reflect the different areas they worked in, whether butchers, dry goods, or otherwise. This photo was donated by a family member of James Duff, who worked in this Bangor Road co-op and who can be seen in this photo, second from the left. Or perhaps you would find a candlestick here at Sam Craig's grocer. Though by 1955, when this photo was taken, it's more likely you would be looking for a light bulb. Once again, we see the shopkeeper behind his counter, ready to pick items off the shelf himself to pack for his customers. It's marvelous to see some brands that are still popular today. Boxes of cornflakes on the top shelf of Sam's right, and bold capital letters advertising boxes of Rivita in the near corner. Now for a shop which was surely popular with Edinburgh citizens young and old. Here is an image of a mixed-purpose shop, a chocolatier's or confectionist, but also clearly advertised as a fruiterer and a florist. Isn't it wonderful to see writing in the window advertising Cadbury's and Fry's chocolate? Some things last forever, it would seem, and rightly so, I would say. As was often the case, this was a family-run business with both the husband and wife working alongside one another in running the shop. This photograph, though from much earlier, in 1880, shows relatives of Sam Craig, the grocer in our last photo, whose middle name was Allison in memory of his relatives, whose name is on the sign above the doorway in this photograph. We think this shop was somewhere in Leith. Perhaps you might know where, from the framework of the windows or the details on the signage. If you recognize it, please get in touch to let us know. Continue our tour of shopkeepers and their shop fronts, we return again to Gorgey Road with this joyous image of a dairy. This photograph was donated by Mary McGaughey and features her mother, Mary Doon, the smiling woman second from the left. The shopkeeper, Angie Fairgrave, holds a bouquet of flowers from the ladies of the neighbourhood. Did you know that there are now as many as 9 dairies around Gorgey in Edinburgh, though perhaps not all of them as popular as Andy's from 1945. And here is another dairy. If the butcher had a bicycle and later a car, how was the milk from the dairy delivered? Why, by horse and cart, of course. This lovely colour photograph shows Teresa McClay outside her home on Gardener's Crescent, snuggled with Buddy the milk delivery horse. Teresa remembers, "The horse, called Buddy, was accustomed to getting tidbits from me when he came round to deliver, and one day, hearing my door opening to put bottles out, he took off without his milkman and brought the cart along the street." Our tour of the High Street is not finished without a final visit to the Fishmongers, and here's a wonderful photograph of lovely young Elizabeth Clement, whose married name is Elizabeth Brocky, posing serenely outside of Robert Brothers Fishmonger on Elm Row. Isn't her wee fisher girl dress lovely? Elizabeth remembers that this photo was taken during the 1950 Herring Festival. There was a competition for the best dressed fishmonger front window, and Robert Brothers Fishmonger at Elm Row was the lucky winner. The beautiful Edinburgh shop fronts in the photographs we have seen today are not just a thing of the past, however. Beginning in 2000, Edinburgh World Heritage has promoted and at least partly funded the restoration of dozens of shop fronts in the Old and New Town. Many of Edinburgh residents are concerned about the conditions of its buildings. They feel that aspects of modern life, including pollution, online shopping, and new build developments, can have a negative impact on the city's historic buildings and the communities that occupy them. Edinburgh World Heritage works hard to protect and conserve these vital elements in the city's old and new towns. There are many details about this wonderful project on the Edinburgh World Heritage website, and even a detailed guide for shopkeepers interested in restoring their own shopfront with the help of the World Heritage. Here is another example of a traditional shopfront restored with the help of Edinburgh World Heritage. This photograph shows Nasir Ahmed, the co-owner of the wonderfully restored Pound Saver on Nicholson Street, posing in front of his shop in the tradition of so many proud Scottish shopkeepers before him. Edinburgh World Heritage website says, "Traditional features add interest and variety and can make a shopfront distinctive. These are an asset to a retail business and should be retained." Independent shops, Pubs, cafes and restaurants are pillars of Edinburgh's Old Town community. They also form an important part of the city's streetscape. However, many private Edinburgh firms or even individuals have also recently worked to beautifully restore vintage Edinburgh storefronts. These photographs, from an article in the Edinburgh Times last year, show the restored shopfront of the Buttercup Dairy at 48 Warrender Park Road, just off the Meadows. The shop is now an architectural firm, and the owners, Malcolm Fraser and Robin Livingston, have meticulously restored the historic frontage to its original beauty. Co-owner Mr. Fraser said, "We did some research and discovered that this was one of the best preserved remnants of the Buttercup Dairy Company. We took the old signboard off and found the old Buttercup Dairy sign underneath, which is rather fabulous looking. It's wonderful to have the lovely shop front to make something which is clean and contemporary inside." We leave you today with a photograph of one more dairy. This one, run by the Miller family on McNeil Street and taken in 1924. Do you have any memories of favourite shopkeepers or beautiful shop fronts? Or perhaps there's a recently restored shop front in your area? If so, please let us know by writing in the comments below or sharing your memories, discoveries, and photographs on our social media pages. Thank you for joining us today for our wee presentation featuring Edinburgh shop fronts from yesterday and today.